it's clear that we're living in a time of a lot of turbulence geopolitically, economically as well as politically. Which of the things that are happening around the world, whether it's the changes in the Middle East or the changes in China, what's happening in Europe, which of these things do you think investors need to be thinking about as short-term events, and which are the things that you think are really changing the structure of the world from a geopolitical standpoint?
Well, in the short run, we have a number of really big spikes that you have to prepare for. For instance, Syria, clearly the refugees are changing the political map of Europe, which then have other consequences. But in the longer run, we should look at trend lines, and some of those are important to keep in line. For instance, the refugee crisis, it may have spiked in Syria, but is an issue that's going to reappear because of climate, because of global health crises, because of other wars. So this population displacement is something we've got to get used to and manage. And the other issue that we should see is an economic geopolitical issue that matters is the long-run decline in oil prices. And that's going to change the distribution of wealth globally. It will have a big impact on the Middle East, much more than the Syria war. It will have a big impact on many other countries around the world that are dependent on oil prices. So that's a sort of a more long-run trend for us to look.
And do you feel like when you're looking around the world that countries are paying attention to international issues, or it seems like particularly in Western Europe and maybe the US, there's a general kind of focus on domestic issues?
They have been focused on domestic issues, but now they're paying a price for it. For instance, Europe focused on Greece and Ireland and Spain and Portugal. It completely ignored the Arab Spring. And now Arab Spring and Syria is now the single biggest threat to the future of Europe. It is disrupting trade within Europe, the Schengen rules. It's reduced the popularity of Angela Merkel from 76% to 49%. It actually may weaken Europe considerably. So definitely people try to dismiss international crises, particularly in the Middle East. Now they're coming big time to haunt them. And so I think people can't be as neglectful as they were in the past.
Who do you think has been effective globally or even regionally from a geopolitical standpoint? Who has taken advantage of this to kind of build up their position, maybe their trading relationships and their stature generally?
I think Russia and China are the ones globally, and then Iran within the region have taken advantage of American withdrawal from international affairs in the past 9-10 years, or the perception of it. Secondly, they've taken advantage of energy prices, gas with the case of Russia and Europe, and also have tried to take advantage of Europe's internal focus, America's internal focus, to actually change the dynamic in South China Sea in the case of China, in Ukraine and Syria in the case of Russia, and in Iran in a way of trying to exploit the gap between Arabs and Americans to forge a nuclear deal or protect their position in Syria.
So one thing you've said in the past is that, look, there's politics, there's economics, and there's business. So can you talk a bit about that? I mean, you've painted a world that's going through a lot of changes. How should people in business be thinking about this?
Well, when we obviously look at long-term business numbers and political stability to be correct for growth. So we think that which markets are growing, which markets are stable. But markets that are growing does not mean that particular sectors or businesses actually will make money in those markets. On the other hand, markets that are broken down or governments that don't function well may be an opportunity for business, because businesses can grow by providing the very services that governments are not able to do. And also they may still do well if the middle class is growing, if there are things that they can leverage in that market, even though the overall numbers may not be correct. So when you look at countries like Nigeria or Pakistan, the stability is not there, political stability is not there, the economic numbers may not add up, but yet many countries are doing really well. So the key to remember is that businesses really do well sometimes when things actually don't work, not because they're working, because the whole business model may be based on taking advantage of breakdowns. And I give the example of private education. Private education is exploding in emerging markets and growth economies exactly because there is a demand for education and the government is unable to provide education. So this is a case in which the breakdown actually favors a business. And so sometimes we shouldn't get too hung up on long-term economic data and focus on what the opportunity is for particular businesses.
So basically it's a complicated world. Some people are taking advantage of it, some people aren't, but the things that we read about as national indicators, either on the politics side or the economic side, may not actually be the right way to think about it if you're a business.
Well, right, and that's where the value of institutions like Abraaj is. Otherwise, we just all would read the World Bank annual reports and make our investments based on that. But the fact that you have an institution that actually has ground level knowledge and can decide who are the winners, who are the losers, which markets may look bad, but actually you can make money in it, is going to become more and more valuable as we go forward. And I think that's going to be the story of growth markets. You're not going to have a singular picture. You're going to have stable economies with bad politics, and you're going to have good politics with bad economics, and still there are going to be companies that can make money, but it requires ability to understand the dynamic within those markets and within those cities and within those middle classes.
Good. Always good to see you, Vali.